So in this video we're going to be taking a look at how we can rough in the shape for these pieces for the arms that you see here, and then this little piece down here for the lower forearm, this piece of the forearm for the right side, and then also this shape that we got for the hook that you see here, along with the belt as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start off with the arm shape, and that's going to be something pretty simple. Anything that we do, we always want to look at whatever that shape is and break it down into the most simple shape that we possibly can. So these arms are going to be nothing more than just cylinders. So we're going to go to Create Polygon Primitives, Cylinder, and then go to the option box for that. I'm going to do the Windows up key just because this is off my monitor here, and I can get that back real quick like that. So let's talk about this divisions and the axis division. You can see if we got a radius of 1, height of 4, it's going to produce something like this. And it's going to be pretty small. Hit undo. We can do a radius of something like 4, and maybe a height of 6, something like that. So you can change these properties. The thing I'm concerned about is this radius here along with the axis divisions set to 8. So you can see with 8, if we turn on our grid real quick so we can see the spacing for this, and we use the multi-cut tool, shift right click in object mode, go to multi-cut tool, we'll just go from here to here like that. I'll hit enter and go like this. You can see this is going to give us a nice pattern for finishing this thing off. So this is divided into 4 and 4 here. If we tap 3 for smooth mesh preview, you can see how this will actually close off the top of this thing pretty nicely. And if we used, if I do F10 and select these edges along through here, and we've looked at this at some other videos on how to do the multi-crease tool. So if we go onto mesh tools and go to crease tool and then middle mouse drag to the right, you can see how we can build a like a really nice cap to the top of this thing. Okay, so this works rather well. I'm gonna just get rid of this real quick and show you that we'll either use a axis division of 8, and that'll give us a pretty nice cylinder that we can kind of work with, but the resolution's kind of low, so the next step up would be going up to 16, and then that way if we do the multi-cut tool and just work our way across this like this here, then we can go from here to here, and then we can go right down across. And you see we've got the same kind of thing going on now, but there's just a lot more geometry to work with. So we could select the edges along here, deselect that, and I'll hold down Control and deselect this. So I just selected everything real quick, hold down Control, drag a marquee, that deselects here, hold down Control and drag a marquee in the middle, that deselects here. So now if I hit 3 and we go back to that crease tool, middle mouse drag to the right, you can see what we've got going on here. So it's just a matter of if I'm going to work with cylinders, I'm going to be working with those numbers. I think it's going to be easier for us to just work with axis division of 8. That'll work pretty good for us, and then do a height of maybe something like that. So hit apply, and that'll just give us something to start with, and we can move this thing up into position. Okay, so the other thing is I want my pivot point to be at the top of this thing. So we can hit insert and we can move this thing up right here like that. We can hold down V and just snap temporarily to verge snapping to the top here. We'll hit insert again, and that sets our pivot point there like that. The other thing we can do, just to add a little bit more for you, is if you hold down D, it temporarily turns on this, you can move the pivot point. So instead of hitting insert, that puts you in a mode where you get to move it. D will temporarily turn that on, and then you could add V along with it, or X for snap to grid. So if I am holding down D and then hold down X along with that, I could snap that to the grid, or if I hold down V while I'm holding down D, I can move that up. So it's just a way of even more quickly moving that pivot point. So let's take this from the front view and let's just get it into place and rotate the arm roughly like this and start matching some of the scale. So we're just using a combination of move and rotate like this to get things into position. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just get it really close. What I do want this thing, the center of this, to really run down about the center of what the arm would be, like that. And I think I'll leave it there for now. And then I'll take this, and we could treat this right here. Let's move this back. And I think we'll be at an angle kind of like this. Let's refer to our drawing a little bit. I think you'll want just a little bit of bend in the arm. And so let's take this face here and put it roughly where the elbow would be. This time whenever we use move, instead of using world and moving around like this, we can use object. And since we rotated this thing, it knows the angle that we rotated it at, and then that way we can just push this face and we can kind of grow this thing to whatever we want. So now let's go ahead and extrude that. Shift right click, and when we've got our face selected, we can say extrude face. We'll do this. Also, I guess we'll just pull this thing down to about here, and I want a slight curvature on this, so I'll move this thing forward like that. Just a slight bend in the elbow. Okay, so we've got that there. I'm going to need a split going down through here, but I'll add that in just a little bit. Let's call this arm left underscore L like that, and I'll group it. Call this arms. I already told you my M key just doesn't want to work sometimes, so no big deal. And I want to keep this orientation of the arm, so I'll just call this arm group left like that. And then you can see when we make a empty group or just group something by hitting Control G on it, it automatically makes that empty group where the origin is already set down here, so we don't have to do any of that freezing of the transformations. So that lets me hold all this information and not have to worry about things. I do think I want to get rid of the information on scale, so go modify freeze transformations and just get rid of the scale portion of that, and you can see how we set that all to 1 by freezing transformations on just scale. And we can delete the history on this thing. And now we can duplicate this thing across, edit, duplicate special as an instance with a negative scale and X. And now we've got arm right, like that. And now we're set up in a way that we can start doing some changes to this, and it's going to happen on both sides for us. Okay, so let's just push this thing down. And again, remember I'm moving in object space right now. And that rotation information is very important whenever we want to keep that angle for this moving in the object space. So I'll take this, push it down just a little bit more like this, and then I'll go ahead and extrude it out like this. And this time, let's rotate it a bit more. Let's go ahead and rotate it all the way up like this. So I think we can set the values over here to 0 and 0, and then we can kind of push this thing forward. Now if I look in wireframe, we can see what's happening a bit better. So I think, let's get back to that face here. So I'll select it, and I think I want to rotate it about here, scale it up a little bit, because we're going to simulate if this this guy had a shoulder, what would be going on with that. And so let's go here. We'll move the entire arm out just so we can see what's going on. So I'll just take that group and move it out just a little bit like this, because it's going to be real easy for us to just set this back to 0 after we move it out. And then I'll use the multi-cut tool, and I'll just go from here. Sorry, it's not liking me for some reason. Let's hit F8, delete history, just to make sure everything's good. Put on the multi-cut tool, and I'm going to drag from this edge. You might not like this negative version. Let's hide that thing real quick. Let's try this now. If we do the multi-cut tool, seems to be getting confused a little bit with that negative instance that we have. So again, I don't know if that's going to be an issue with the version that you're using, but if you run into that, maybe that'll help you kind of figure out why that's happening. So I'll hit F9, and I want to take those verts that we just created. This time I'll put on world and just use this, kind of move it around a little bit. So you see how we're building some rounding for that shoulder, for the mass of the shoulder that we would have. And I can pull this forward, these verts. That way we start to build up a shape of what would actually be happening with that shoulder. And I'll take this point and lift it up just a little bit. Now we could take this point here, now that we've got this geo that we're working with, pull it down here, so we're building more of the shape of the shoulder coming down. So the peak of the shoulder kind of comes to a point right here, so we can pull this down. But when we do that, we're going to need some more geo going through here, which no big deal. We'll just go ahead and make that. So I'm just going to kind of finesse this a little bit, and we'll go to F8, shift right click multi-cut tool. We'll go from here going across like that, and now we've got some new points to work with, so we can start rounding off that shape. Remember, we talked about this quite a bit already. If we are adding geo, we should be adding it for a reason, and we should be doing something with it. So you can see every time I add these new splits, it gives me an opportunity to change the shape and change curvature on things, and that's what I'm looking for. So it's starting to give me that shape. Again, this is supposed to represent kind of where the elbow is going to be on there. So let's just delete history on that, and we'll take that group and push it back to 0 right there. And then we can bring back our other one and take a look. And that's giving us at least the start shape of what this thing can look like. Now, we do have some clothing that gets pushed into some shapes here. So it could be easy for us to just take the bottom of this thing, extrude the face on it, and change the offset and pull that in a little bit. And you can see we can start to build something that looks like it's going to be tucked into a shape like that. So now it's not going to be perfect, but it's at least the start of something for us. And then now we need to kind of, we'd have to build up some of the shapes that you got for the different clothing. And you're definitely going to want splits on here for deformation. So if we got a joint that sits right here and it rotates around, you're going to want probably a split coming through here and here. So just to make sure that this doesn't give me any problems, I'm going to hide that other side because it was giving me issues. I'm going to use that multi-cut tool again, shift right click, multi-cut tool. And so this is something that's kind of cool about this tool, is that if you get a certain angle like this, if we tap 4, you can just click and drag a line out, and it should slice all the way through the model, but it's not going to. So I can at least come here like this and work my way around the model. So at the time of this making of this video, this multi-cut tool is it works sometimes for some of these functions and sometimes not, because yeah, I'm supposed to just be able to drag right through that thing. Let's try F8 and try it in object mode now. And I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that I had some faces selected, so I'm just still trying to figure out why this tool does what it does or doesn't do sometimes, and I'm just going to chalk some of this stuff up as it's a tool in development still and just doesn't work. So you can see there, it just worked, and not really sure why, but so hopefully you can get that to work, because that is a pretty handy feature. Because if I want an angle to go right across this thing, that comes in really handy, because now I can just slice right through the model, and now I've got some rings or edges that go all the way around like this for the deformation part. So whenever this arm bends, it's got enough geo around it to do the bending portion of it. So let's bring this back here. And this will be good enough for right now, just to get that rough shape set in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this version. So say File, Save Scene As, and remember we're doing the incremental save. And so remember, we can go to the workspace root after our project's been set, and then we can go to, this is where I'm saving it, Tools and Resources, Maya, Scenes, and just giving it a number at the end of it. So this is going to be pirate model underscore 007, save as, and then we should be good to go for that shape, and then we'll go work on the next shape. Alright, let's go ahead and move down to this lower arm and hand area. The thing I wanted to point out real quick is that I wanted to make sure I had a view of the concept as well as some of the orthographic views that were set up for the modeling template. So I just went ahead and went into Photoshop and took the concept, put that into a square format, and then gave an alpha channel. Let's go ahead and look with it on here. And you can see, turning off this is what the alpha channel looks like for that. And then that was saved out as a 32-bit target file. We looked at an earlier part of the video how to set this up for the image planes. It's the same exact process. Then we did this stand-in piece of geo that you see here, and we cut around this. This process for making this was exactly the same. So got this guy selected here. Something else to note, if we go to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, and pull this up, we already had the material made for this. I'm going to mouse drag this down into the work area and then graph it so you can see. So we already had the character piped in here to the material, and then in here we had the transparency set to knock out that background. So since this was already set up and working, we could just select this material and go to Edit, Duplicate Shading Network, and when you do that, it's going to make an exact copy of this material and any of the connections that it had. So it changed, made a copy of this texture file as well. So all we had to do at that point was, I'll take this and graph this as well, selecting both of these guys at the same time. Hold down Shift and select that, and then graph these. And you can see I've got, after we made that duplicate, you can just go in here and change the name up here, change the texture file, and then change the name of the material, and you got an exact copy of the other material and everything's set up. And then you can just middle mouse drag that onto the piece of geo, or you can select the geometry and right click on here and say assign material to selection. You have the wrong material on there. So you can see how once one material is set up, you can quickly just share that information. Okay, let's make this shape right down here for this part of the arm. So we'll just go back to the Create Polygon Primitives, and we'll use the cylinder again. And then we'll just go ahead and move that up into the right spot here. So let's go ahead and push this here and rotate it right here. And if we wanted to match the angle of the rotation of this, we could steal some of that information. We could just copy that, then paste that in here like that. And I think we have a little rotation on X, we could copy that and we could paste that here like that. And now we should have something that's slightly matching. Well, it's matching this angle here, but it's not matching the angle that we have for the thing that's kind of growing out right here. So we can just take that and then scale that thing up. That is one problem with this orthographic drawing that was made, is that the arms are chopped off so you can see through the body here, but the arms are not there, so you're going to have to kind of make up some of that information yourself. So let's just try to match that rotation like what we got going on here, and it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you try to match it up the best that you can. And you can see if we rotate that just a little bit like this and move it into position, we've got something that's fairly close for what we're looking for. So let's take the bottom of this thing here and we'll just push it down to where the wrist would actually fall. So let's put that back on object for movement like that. We're going to push that down. Oops, let's go with the front view right here like that, and just scale that thing down roughly about right here. And then now we can use the insert Edgeloop tool that we were looking at before. So we'll go to object mode, shift, right click, insert Edgeloop tool, and we need an edge loop about here because we're going to scale this out, and then we need something about here, and we'll do something here like that. So we've got these new loops to work with, so we can just double click on them and we can scale this thing up. We'll do a uniform scale like this. We can scale this up here like this, and you can see how we're starting to match that shape pretty quickly for ourselves. Let's take a look at the drawing real quick. So we could give this thing just a little bit of a lip on this side, so we could extrude this thing out and then do the offset, then maybe give it a thickness like that, and then maybe just pull it in again. So we'll tap G, do a little bit of an offset on this thing right here like that, and then hit G again, and we can push it in. So if we move this thing off to the side a little bit, we can see what's going on here. We've basically built something where the arm piece can kind of go into it. So I'll hit undo for the movement. And then remember what we did for our clothing here. We built this little lip that we had going on here, so we can actually take that face and push it down and then scale it in a bit more. So let's scale this whole thing in a little bit more like that, so you can see how it looks like it's being tucked in there a little bit better. Okay, so the rest of this is, if we kind of imagine this little shape here going into the wrist of the thing, let's just go ahead and take this and we'll extrude it in. We'll offset it a little bit like this, and we'll hit G again and do a little bit of an offset like this, and then push it up, and then hit G again to pull that thing out. And let's look from the front. I think we're building up enough. If we tap 5, you can see this is really the ridge that we're building here. So I'm going to grow this selection out, shift, and then the arrow key that's tied to the period key next to the question mark key, and we'll just grow this thing out like this, and then we'll put it on the move tool and then push it up. You can see I'm trying to make this hit a little bit better on this ridge right here, and then grow that thing out just a little bit like that to get that shape that we got going on here. Okay, so this can cause a problem if we have a face that's got more than 4 sides on it, so we'll just go ahead and say shift right click, extrude it, give it an offset, and then we can just shift right click, merge face to center, just like that, and we've taken care of that any kind of problem that might have. Let's delete history on it, tap 4 because I want to get this top face, so I hit F11, and then we'll do that same thing. We'll just extrude the face, give it an offset, then shift right click, merge face to center. So now we've got a clean piece of geometry that could go anywhere and it won't cause any kind of problems or anything like that. So we can call this forearm. And I did, well, my M key was working at one point. I think I might have figured out what that is. I've got some recording software going on, and there might be a hotkey tied to that. So I don't think it's a Maya thing. I think it's actually when I'm recording the video that's happening. So I've just been going in and adding the M later. A little annoying on my part, but nothing you guys should be worried about. So let's delete, not delete history. Let's actually freeze the transformations for the scale in this. So we'll go to modify freeze transformations and then set the scale like that. And we've got that going on. Now you do notice on the other side that we have some kind of shape, but it's not exactly the same here. We've got a little bit of a cylinder going on, so we might be able to steal some of this. And let's do this left like that. And then this time, instead of doing a negative instance, because this won't be an instance, we just need a copy of it. Let's just hit Control D for a duplicate of it, and we'll call this form right like that, and we'll give it a negative scale ourselves over here like that. Problem is, before I give it a negative scale, the pivot point for this is right here. Remember, so we could go and freeze the transformations, reset the transformation, and put the pivot right down here, but I do want this angle and keep this information. So I'll just hit Control G to group it, and I'll call this, I'll just copy this whole thing and paste it for the name, and I'll call this GR for group, right? And then now I can give it a negative scale. Here's the interesting thing. So I put this in a group, give it a negative scale, and if we take a look at the scale on this, everything's fine. There's no negative anything. But if I unparent it from this thing, because when we make it a group, we're actually parenting it into that. So we can middle mouse drag it out. That's one way of unparenting it. You can hit Shift P, will unparent as well. Or we can go to Edit, Unparent. So here's where the parent sits and unparenting something. So if you had it unparented, Shift P, and you want it parented to this, you can select this, then tap P like that, and you can see how it parents it. But here's what I want you to notice. As we unparent it, it's going to give a negative scale on Z for us there. So it's going to take care of the math for flipping this thing, but because it's not in a group, then it has to do something with it. So now we can get rid of that empty group, and we can say modify freeze transformations, and this time we only want to freeze the scale like that, and we should be set to go on this. So again, I only need so much of this thing. Let's get rid of everything down here. So I'm just gonna add to my selection, Control Shift, and keep dragging that marquee. So I don't need any of this, so we'll hit backspace. Let's go to the front view and tap 4 to see wireframe, and I can select the outer edge. Just double click it and it'll select it, and we are moving an object. So that's why I wanted to keep that rotational information, the translation information on that, so I can put it in this object mode and I can still just push this thing up and down to make it grow or shrink however I wanted. So I just want a little lip like this, and then now I'm going to grow that thing out by extruding the edge, and I'll go ahead and just move this in object, or I'm sorry, it was an object. I'll click on this and I'll push it in world like that, but I'm just going to put it on the move tool because I want to steal this object movement and push it down. So let's look at this real quick. If I would have taken this thing and extruded the edge, it's possible we could push this thing down, but it's not going to grow the way that we want. We could give it a thickness, but you can see it's going to do this, and then we would have to figure out an offset. That's just not what I wanted. So I wanted to get out of this tool and just use the movement in the object space. So I just clicked on the regular move tool, and since it's already selected, now I can just push this thing straight down. So just a little note on how and why that is working the way that it is. So I will make another lip on here, so we'll just do this, extrude edge, and this is all because we're working with edges. If we were working with faces, this would be behaving a bit different. So let's actually take a look at that. So we can take this thing and we could close it off. So we know we can do shift right click, pen to polygon tool. So we can just move around this thing like that, and now we got a face to work with. And with the face, it's going to be a little bit easier. Let's just select this F11, select this face and extrude it, and now we got our whole offset thing going on, and we can just push this thing down, and that just makes life a lot easier. Tap G to extrude this thing out again, and like this, and I'll hit G again and do an offset this way like this, pull it down just a little bit, and then hit G like that. And I don't know, I really don't want that face. I'll just grow this thing back to here and hit backspace, because what I'm going to do next is for this this thing here, I'm going to use a polygon sphere, a primitive sphere, and I'm going to attach it to this thing. Okay, so to do that, let's do this. Accidentally docked that there. Let's just go ahead and go create Polygon Primitives, and we'll use a sphere, and we'll go ahead and change this to 8 and 8. We'll fix this up in just a second. Radius, we'll do like 4 or something like that. And then now I'm going to actually take this object and then select this. I'm going to parent this to this. So remember, we can just do P and that'll parent it. You can see now the polysphere is a parent to this. And because this is parented, it should get the translation and rotation information from its parent. So all this translation information that you see here is actually offsetting it from its parent, and it's keeping it down here. That's why whenever we first started, you see how everything's zeroed out, but then now if we parent it to this thing, it's got to do some kind of offset from the parent. So that's what all this information is here. So if we take this and we zero everything out, it's going to put that thing where the parent origin is. So if we select the parent origin, you can see here's the parent origin and here's the sphere origin. And then now I can just rotate this thing 90 degrees on this axis here, and then I could scale this thing up, and you can see I'm getting it close to this size here. But I want to, if we look at this shape of this, this is more of a sphere, and this is about the center point here, and it kind of starts to bend in again. So that's kind of what we got going on here for our piece of geometry. So let's just scale this thing up until it gets roughly about the right size here. We'll do that, and we don't need it to be perfect because we're going to join the two of these pieces together. Now, before I do that, I want to take a look and go, do I have enough divisions going through here? It's not too bad. I mean, our whole model's kind of chunky, and we're doing this low-res thing, so I think this will be okay for us. We could pump it up to 10 or something like that. That's possible. So we could just do that. If we do that, we have to kind of rearrange this just a little bit. So I'll hit F11, and we're going to get an angle like this, and then just start selecting these faces that go all the way around. So again, to select some faces and then continue on with that selection, to add to it, Control plus Shift. We'll keep adding to that, and then now we can just hit backspace on it, and we had one face that stuck around. Tap 5, and then now we'll take this object and we can snap up the points to this. So we'll get in close to it, hit F9 for our verts, and then we'll put in the move tool, and we just hold down V to temporarily turn on vert snap, and then we can go here and just snap this thing all the way around. And we can join all these two pieces together. The only problem is if you combine the objects together, you lose the information for the translation and all that. So we'll lose our object space information that we had, and that might come in handy for us. We do have this, you see this little lip that we've got going down here, and if we go to the front view, let's see about the size of this thing. So it's pushed up a little bit higher than maybe what we got going on here. So here's where we can use that insert Edgeloop tool and just slide something right about there is what we need. And now we don't need all these edges. So let's select one point, F9, and then we can convert that to edges. So hit Control F11 or F10. Control F10 will make the edges, and then now we can grow this out one thing. So hit Shift and then the right arrow key like we've been doing for growing out the selection, and hit Delete, and then we've got rid of that. So now we can just do a regular extrusion on it. So Shift right click, Extrude Face, and we can pull that thing down, and this is about roughly the thickness of it. And we'll do another extrusion, offset it a little bit like this, pull it down, hit G again, and then offset it a little bit more, and then hit G and pull it down, and that'll be the start of this piece that we got here for the hook. And let's just check the thickness. So the thickness is it's working. It's fairly close, and again, we're gonna get in that ballpark. It's not gonna be 100% perfect to the drawing. So let's see what we got going on here. We've got this. Let's go ahead and I'm going to make everything a hard edge. Actually, do everything soft edge. So we'll do soften edge and do soften this. Okay, and hit G for the last command for this. So everything's nice and soft. And remember, if we want to view this thing with hard edges, we can just go up to shading and then do flat shade all, and then now we can kind of see the volume for this. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video real quick, and then we'll get back and start adding a few more of these pieces within here. All right, in this part we're going to take a look at how we can make the actual claw for this shape here. And I know this isn't final or done, but I just wanted to show you real quick some of the methods for this. So we've looked at extruding a piece. You know, we can select that face and extrude that thing out, but it's possible that you can extrude along a path or a curve as well. There's a certain order that you have to select it. You have to select the curve first, then go to the object, then select the face that you want to extrude, and then you have to extrude it, and then you have to give it divisions along that curve. But let's take a look at how we set that thing up. So let's just get rid of this curve that we have here currently. And there's a certain display mode that I can use to get the center of the faces on here. So let's go to the display, polygon, custom polygon display, and then we can turn on face centers. If I turn that off, you can see it turns that information on or off, and just hit apply like that. And then that gives you something that you could actually snap to whenever you're creating your curve. So we can go to create, and we'll use a CV curve tool, and we can just go ahead and temporarily hold down V and turn on vert snapping, and then we can snap to the center of that face, and that comes in handy for us. Now let's go to the side view, and we're going to have to use a little imagination here because we don't have anything drawn for this. So draw 1 point, 2 point, and then by the third point, let me hit backspace just so you can see this. By the third point that you draw, it starts to draw the curve. So that usually throws people off a little bit. I'm just going to hit backspace to get back here again. But once that's going, once you lay down a point, you can see that curve starts to follow here. And if we build a point here, you'll start to get a feel for like how you have to make more like a hard edge turn. You need more points in the corners, but you don't necessarily need so many going down through the length of this thing. So if I put 2 there in the corner, that'll work pretty good. I'll do 2 in the corner here, and then 1 like that. So I'll hit enter for that. And then this is the shape that we have going on for our curve. And obviously it's not the angle that we need, so we can change the pivot of that, remember we can hold down D and really quickly move the pivot. If we add V with that, we can snap that to that center face that we turned on. And now when we rotate this thing into place, let's just check it against the this view here and try to get it roughly into place like that. And then we'll try to go right here like that, maybe rotate it. And this is where, you know, we got this drawing, but maybe it's not going to be so perfect for us. So let's select that thing in object mode, F8, select it, and then scale it. We could at least get the scale correct on it, roughly like that. And if we want to go back and tweak this, we can right click over this and say control vertex, and then you can get back to these points. It is possible that you could select a point and you could hit backspace and delete it if you wanted to. I'm going to hit undo for that and just leave that point there. But you can tweak on this thing a bit after it's created. And the cool thing is, if you don't delete history after you make this extrusion, you can even tweak these points after the fact and it should update for you. See, I don't know if I need that one in the middle. I'll keep it there, just make that kind of travel the way that I want for that straight line. And I think I'm being a bit nitpicky. Okay, so we've got this, and we'll hit F8, go in the object mode and select it. And I think I like this. So this is, you know, even with this wire, we can kind of preview what's this thing going to look like, and is the angle going to be good for us? Do we like this angle that it's at? So once that's looking pretty good, let's look at the order for selecting this thing. So we need to select the curve itself in object mode, and then we can go over the top of the object that we want to extrude the face on, and then right click and say object mode, and then select it. And then now we need the face for it, so I'll right click and say face, select that face. Let's tap Q because the manipulator is getting in the way. And then now that we got that selected, see, we got a curve selected, and now we got our face selected, and now we want to extrude that thing. So you know how to do the extrude, just do shift, right click, extrude face, and it's going to go from here to the end of the curve, which looks weird at first, but then we just crank up these divisions to the amount that we need, and I'll probably just do more than what we need. And after it's created, I told you we could tweak that curve and still keep this thing if it's live, but I don't really want to do that. I want to delete the history on it like this. So deleted the history. Let's go to F8 right here, delete history. And I want to turn off this face center thing. That just is kind of distracting. We just needed it for just a little bit. So we'll go to display, polygons, custom polygon display, and turn off that face centers like that. And then now we've got this to work with where we could take this center piece here. Let's just go ahead and merge face to the center like that. And so we got this point here, and that works okay. Now it's possible that we could take these rings, double click those edges, and just scale those things in and uniformly scale this stuff in like this. But what I want to show you is if we take this, you see it didn't put a nice split here for us. We could use the insert Edgeloop tool like we've been doing. So I'll hold an edge here like this, but I want to get rid of this one. So we can hold down control, right click, and say to Edgeloop utilities, to Edgeloop and delete. And now we can start selectively just selecting one of these and hit G for our last tool or last command. We don't need anything going down through here, and there's a lot of divisions here. So here's how we can kind of be selective about how we're creating geometry for things. And if you notice, let's see if we can get rid of this one here. So that's pretty nice and straight. Maybe we don't need this one here. Sorry. Let me go to my quad view here. I just tapped the wrong button and screwed up the interface. That'll happen. I'm going to get rid of this. I did G for last command. That's funny. Okay. here we are. So I need to go back and control right click to get that command back to Edgeloop and delete, and now I'm good on things. I think I want a split going down right through here, so I'm gonna use that insert edge loop, give me something like that, but then I want to get rid of this thing right here. And hopefully you're starting to see we got this, we need the curvature on the outer part, but then these inner parts are just kind of a jumbled up mess that doesn't really do anything for us. So if we selected all the verts like this, this, and this, and just merge to center, then that starts to clean up pretty good. We could probably do the same for this right here. And we could come right here, do the same for that, and that's starting to look cleaner. That's starting to look more like what we need, right? So let's do that same process here. Let's do that process here. And so you can see sometimes Maya spits out things and it's not perfect, but you know, you try to take what is good about it and maybe finesse it a little bit and massage it, and it'll turn into something more usable for you. So it'd be nice if the computer did all the work, but it just does not work that way. So tap G right here to merge those, and I'm getting close here with this. Got this one here. Tab G. Okay, that's getting pretty good. And so let's go along this backside. So I think this part is going to be a bit trickier. Let's see if this works here. I know if we select all these verts like this in this area and we merge them together, so I'll do G, you see how the mesh traveled quite a bit to average between all those points? That's not exactly what I want. I do want this thickness that we got going on here, so I need it to stay somewhere around in there. So this is really the point where I need everything to kind of come up to. So instead of merging everything, I can take those points and hold down, while I move, hold down V and just snap them up to this point, and then now I can merge them. And that's getting closer to what I need. So on here, I think I like this point, and I want to pull everything up to that point there. So I'll just select these points, hold down V and snap it to this, and then merge it. Same thing for over here. Let's take a look, and I guess I like this point here. So it's like that, hold down V, snap it here, and no, actually I don't. That doesn't look so hot. So I actually like this point better, and I'll push this over here to that. So sometimes this is just a little, trial and error, and you have to see what it looks like to get the right thing. And I'll merge these to the center, and then I think that looks pretty good, but I don't think we even need those, so we can merge those together like that. And let's take a look around this thing just real quick. I'm not going to get too picky on this because we're going to do another cleanup pass later on things. So we can just go to normal, soften edge like we did before. Do that in here. So we got this shape and it's parented to that, remember? So I'm trying to unparent this just so I can soften the edge on that real quick. Just like that. And if we want, we could parent that thing back, but you can see it's keeping our rotation and all that information that we need, so I can just keep that off. I don't need that curve anymore. I want to make sure I deleted the history on it for sure, because if I had history on there and deleted this curve, that could cause problems. So let's just call this hook like that, and then we've got Control G and call this forearm, right, and this is forearm left. Like that. And then I'm going to throw this into, remember I'm using this build group temp, like that. So here's everything, and we'll go ahead and view this with flat shade at all. And let's just take a look real quick at poly count and see where we're starting to get now that we've created some of more of these elements, and now we're up to about 2,000 polys on this thing. So you know, if the target count was about 5,000 polys or so, I think we're making okay progress here. You know, we got this lip on here, we can get rid of some of that stuff, but we'll talk a little bit later about how to finesse everything to get everything down to that right target count. Okay, we're going to make the belt, and this one should be pretty quick. Let's just go ahead and do a create polygon primitives, and we'll do a cylinder, and we'll go ahead and change the axis division on that from 8 to 16. And let's just move this up into position here, right in here. Get a little bit of this angle that we got going on here, and then scale this thing up this way, like this, and we'll try to fix that angle up again. Now we'll just go ahead and scale this thing down this way, and we'll look at it from the front and then the perspective. So things look fairly decent. I think I'll move this up just ever so slightly. I think I got vert snap accidentally got turned on, so let's just finesse this movement just a little bit more, scale it up like this. And now we need to, it's not a perfect you know, cylinder shape here like this, so we got to tweak it a little bit. So I'm going to hit F10, and here's something that we can look at. We'll do the soft mod tool, so we tap B, and we can grow or shrink that by holding B and clicking left and right while holding that down to grow or shrink that. The other thing is we could hold down Control and Shift and right click, and we can introduce Symmetry. So it's just us getting to this thing basically with the Move tool. If you go to the soft selection area over here like this, you can turn Symmetry on, and we're just temporarily doing that by holding down Control Shift and right clicking on there and saying Symmetry with the world and X-axis, and that's what we want here. So we just turned it on that way. So there's two different ways to get to it. It's up to you how you want to do that. So we can pull this thing out. Now you remember this tool gives us, it's more like working with you know, just kind of like digital clay kind of. I'm going to put in the Move tool and want to use this object mode because we made this cylinder and we gave it an axis like that, and now we can just know that if we use just this little plate here, we can push in two axes and it won't get pushed up. If it gets pushed up, it starts to get this wobble in it, and so we'll just use this thing to push this thing out here. We might pull this thing out a little bit more here, maybe push this in just a bit, and let's just try to get a consistent thickness throughout the whole thing, and we'll get it pretty close because we can do an extrusion on this thing and change that after we're done to build up the lip on this thing. You'll see what I mean pretty quick here. So we're getting really close. Now is one of those cases where, okay, we've got the shape in, and I think this is giving us better information than maybe this piece here. So now we got to take this and maybe pull that down just a little bit and push it in. You can see how we're just intersecting these shapes now, like that. And I'll just decrease the soft select just so I'm moving more about just the points there. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. Now I can take this and pull this in just slightly and push it down. Right there like that. Got this here, and I'll take that and pull that down just a little bit like that. Okay, so now we can take this shape. We could delete the history on it. So let's delete the history on this thing. And then also let's take this top face, I'll tab B to get up that soft select, this top face and the bottom face, and let's do an extrude on it. Shift right click, extrude face, and then change the thickness and tap 4 so we can see wireframe. Let's just give it something like this. Okay, and we could hit G again, do that, and then I'm just going to hit backspace, and we're going to get rid of the information within there. If we need it back later, we can do that later, but for now I think that's going to be okay. So I accidentally clicked over to Photoshop. Let's see here. So you see how we got this kind of lip going on here and through here. So let's go ahead and take the Insert Edgeloop tool, shift right click over it, and then just click here and here like that, and then that's given us this geo. And now we can just select one of these edges, control right click, and say to edge ring utilities, to edge ring, like that, and it'll give us all these faces going around. It should, and for some reason it's only giving us those going there. That's okay. If we hit F11, let's try this method. If we hit F11 and then select the face here, we can hold down Shift and make it go around. So that's all we need. Now we want to move this thing out. So let's put it on move. This time we're going to, let's look at going and moving along the normal of this thing. And I got to convert these to verts to make this work. So Control F9, we'll put this in this vertex mode. That's why in face it doesn't work correctly, but if we travel along this end, we can push these things out like this, and that's pushing it along the normal, which are those little directions of each face, like that. So I think that's pretty good for what we need. So I think we're good on that. So let's just keep that as the belt, like this, and then we'll just put this into the build group, and now we have the belt made. So again, let's just make sure that we're saving in iterations on this. So I'll say File, Save Scene As, and I'm going to put number 8 at the end of this one, like that. And that's that section for the belt.